Check, check, check. Good morning, everybody. We'll commence in about 30 seconds. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us at meeting number 13 of Transportation Committee meeting. We acknowledge that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the culture and presence who have been nurtured and continue to be nurtured on this land. Today, we do have regrets from Vice Chair Kitts. So, Councillor Lowe, if you ever have to step in if I need a bio break, congratulations, you're going to be my temporary Vice Chair today. Everyone good with that? Great, thank you. On that, I'll get Rosa if you wish to do a quick roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley?
Here.
Councillor Derouz?
Here.
Councillor Desroches?
Here.
Councillor Devine?
Here.
Councillor Dudas? Councillor Gower?
Here.
Councillor Johnson?
Here.
Councillor Lowe?
Here.
Councillor Luloff?
Morning, Rosa.
Councillor Troster?
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts and Chair Tierney.
Present.
Chair, we have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. So at this point, just prior to the commencement of the meeting, we do have some special awards we wish to give out. So I'm going to change my seat temporarily and we'll commence with the Bruce Timmermans Award ceremony. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Tierney. Mon nom est Tim Tierney, conseiller pour le quartier de Beacon Hill-Sudville. I'm also the Transportation Chair. Before we begin today's meeting, I'm pleased to present the winners of the 2024 Bruce Timmermans Cycling Award. Today's presentation is extra special because it happens during Let's Bike Month, a long celebration hosted by our partners at Enviro Center. Thank you very much. Yeah, giveaway. We love you guys. And, you know, it's been a great month in celebrating cycling in Ottawa. Each year, a number of people engaged in Let's Bike Month continue to grow and grow, and this year is no exception. As chair, I've seen firsthand the advancement of active transportation in our city over the many years I've been on council. And 10 days ago, we saw the opening of the new Rideau River multi-use pathway bridge that connects Carleton University and Vincent Massey Park. Our city's official plan and transportation master plan continue to be brought to life through the work of our wonderful city staff and our partners, and helping lay the solid foundation for cycling programs and initiatives. The city continues to demonstrate a firm commitment towards sustainability. Active transportation remains a key part of the collective effort in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And these efforts are paying off. Results from the city's recent Origin Destination Travel Survey were released earlier this month as part of the phase of engagement for the Transportation Master Plan. The data shows the percentage of daily trips made by cycling has doubled since 2011. Overall, 4% of the trips were made by cycling in 2022, a significant level of growth. And thanks to the creative and passionate individuals of the groups, our city is positioned to continue to grow and advance our active transportation network, evolve our cycling infrastructure, and provide fun. Now on to the awards. First, I'd like to share some background about the Bruce Timmermans Award. Bruce Timmermans was the champion of cycling in Ottawa and worked hard to promote safe cycling in our city. Bruce founded a group that is now known as Bike Ottawa, was director of bicycle clubs, and taught bicycle maintenance, and of course, knows bike safety. Since his passing in 1998, Bruce Timmerman Cycling Award has continued as a legacy for the passion of the cycling, recognized by the contribution of individuals and organizations committed to advancing cycling within our community and city. Members of the public are invited to nominate people or groups that best represent Bruce's work and vision. Notably, I must mention the awards themselves are beautiful works of art. You see them here, and we'll have many opportunities for photos later on. They're custom made by Retro Rides Jason Comandat. This is an amazing artist who creates these pieces from scratch, very much in line with Bruce's passion on reusing old bicycle parts, in this case, repurposed for a great cause. I found this interesting. Each piece of art includes one of Bruce's old bikes. It's truly fitting to keep him close to that bike community. I'd also like to thank the member of Bruce Timmerman's family who is here with us today, Michael Timmermans. Please give him a round of applause, everybody. Mike's an avid cyclist and has done a fantastic job on representing his family's passion for cycling and their ongoing commitment to Bruce's legacy. I'm honored to be a member of the award selection committee. I'm always inspired by all the nominees' work and enhanced cycling in our city for everybody. Now I'll present the award to the individual winner. It was very hard, by the way. We've had many meetings and many discussions. I'm looking at you. So now I'll get on to the presentation. The 2024 individual winner of the Bruce Timmerman Cycling Award is Kat Weaver. It has been said that Kat has grown up in the bicycling community, coming from a rural community with no public transit available. Kat's bike was the one way to get around town. When she moved to Ottawa as a student, she brought her bicycle with her and has been riding for fun and fitness ever since. Her personal passion for cycling has always been something she's wanted to share. To that end, she is doing something very special here in Ottawa and the Ottawa community in teaching at-risk teens how to live healthy, purposeful lives by learning how to ride a bicycle. It was her help with her own kids with the school cycling trips. She noticed that there was an equity issue for many of the classmates, not only accessing bicycles, but also learning how to ride them. Many of these young children were newcomers to Canada, and Kat saw the opportunity to share her love with the cycling and those around her with the wonderful activities and trips. This began Kat's journey as the founder of Trips for Kids Ottawa. Trips for Kids program is designed to be inclusive, provide fun and safety, outdoor recreational activities for everyone and everyone. Regarding the social, economic status, language, gender identity, or skill level, we applaud Kat's amazing work for bringing it to those communities. Unfortunately, Kat could not be here today. We do have the wonderful Gwen, give a wave, that is here today representing Kat. And I'd like to invite, first of all, Michael Timmermans to join me in the presentation of the award. So at this point, I'll call Gwen forward to take the presentation, and we'll have a quick photo opportunity. Let's see if I can do this in one shot. He does it all. Great. Thank you very much for that. And now I'm pleased to announce the organizational winner for the 2024 Bruce Timmerman Cycling Awards. which this year goes to Black Girls Do Bike, National Capital Region Chapter. The National Capital Region Chapter of Black Girls Do Bike was founded in 2023. A newer cycling group in Ottawa, they aim to provide safe cycling, riding experiences, and exploring the city for bike by all new riders from the unrepresented groups. Their international organization's mission statement is dedication to fostering and nurturing a vibrant community of women of color who share the same passion for cycling. We are thrilled to have them here today as we announce the winners. Again, I'd like to invite Michael Timmermans back up front and the family to represent me today as the co-founder. We have Coco. Coco, thank you very much for all you do for the Black Girls Do Bike community. And I'll get you to step forward as we do the dedication and the photo. Yeah, give it up, people. There, I'll pull in later. And we should definitely have plank. We can go. Okay, yeah, we're good. Oh yeah, we got a shift. Yeah, yeah. So again, congratulations to our winners and thank you to the, look, give it up for the Enviro Center, everybody. It was a very tough stand up. It was a very tough, and yes, all our friends, please stand up. So, oh my goodness. How is that not in my notes here? Forgive me. Did I miss it? Jason made these beautiful awards, by the way, everybody. Well, let's do it. Let's get up here with the wonderful hardware, the winners, and Jason. We'll all fit in there.
Okay. And as I said, Jason here, hi. Oh my God, I love your tattoo. Got a bike tattoo.
Okay, we're all gonna have to turn a little bit in, and these are the hardware here. And you gotta pop in one. You gotta pop in one too. Sure. No, the good official one, the high res. Thank you. All right, I'll do this on the move so we can get on to the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. That was great, and I really appreciate you coming out, Mr. Timmermans. That's terrific today. So we'll go back to the podium and we'll start with the rest of the meeting today. Thank you. All right, Councillor Devine, good. All right. So thank you very much, everybody, for that. So we'll continue with the rest of the meeting. Do we have any declaration of interest? Seeing none. Confirmations of TRC minutes 12, May 23rd, 2024. Is that item carried? Thank you. Item number 5 is 5.1 speed board displays. It was just an inquiry. Is this item received?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, pardon me, Councillor?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Did we do roll call? Maybe I missed it.
Yes, we did.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
present. Sorry.
Yep, not a problem.
Great, Chair.
6, we have the on-street parking rate changes. We have no presentations, no written submissions, no delegations. We do have staff here. Now, a reminder, this is separate from 6.2, which is another item that we'll be holding. But for the on-street parking rate changes, no presentations, no submissions, no delegations. Does anyone see this item need to be held on the agenda today? Thank you. Is this item received? Thank you. 6.2, we do have a presentation from staff, and we do have one delegation to speak today, so we'll hold 6.2. 6.3, Parking Services 2023 Annual Report. No presentations, no written submissions, no delegations. We do have staff on board if we wish to hold this item. Otherwise, we will free them. Is this item received or carried? It says carried. I know they keep going back and forth on this. All right. Legal stuff. 7, we have a councillor's item. 7.1, Councillor Gower Fernbank. Area speed reduction. We'll hold that item as there's a speaker. I'm a little confused. I'm not sure if it really relates to it, but nonetheless, we'll deal with that item when I come back onto the agenda. And now I believe that's it from the agenda perspective. So I'll go back to the
Chair.
items. Oh, and we also have the IPD of 9.1
Yeah.
Canada North Transit Environmental
Chair
Assessment.
Tierney, I apologize. We just passed the parking services annual report, but I actually do have questions.
So we'll hold that
Could we
item.
hold that and go back to it? Thank you. You were just so fast. Okay. Six point three.
So in order, we have 6.2 and 6.3 held, as well as 7.1. So 6.2, we will begin with that, unless it's a quick question, Councillor Troster? Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. We'll hold it. All right, so we'll go to Kitchissippi parking study update. We do have a presentation, so I'll ask staff to come forward and please make the presentation. Then we'll go to our delegation, and then obviously questions to staff.
Good morning, Chair, members of Transportation Committee. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the Kitchissippi parking study update that is recently completed, including the recommended outcomes. Next slide, please. So the Westboro and Wellington West areas have been the subject of previous parking studies. Specifically in Westboro, earlier studies date back decades. This study represents an update to the local area parking studies that were completed for each area in 2017. The study area was kept consistent with those studies, encompassing the neighborhoods of Westboro, Wellington West, and Hindenburg. The study area extends north and south from the commercial main street of Richmond, Wellington, and Somerset, and stretches from Broadview Avenue in the west to the Trillium Line in the east. So it's roughly 4 kilometers end to end. Within the study area, there are 2 BIAs, 4 community associations, and almost the entirety of the study area is within Kitchissippi Ward, but a small piece on the west end falls within Bay Ward. In addition to following up on the previous local area parking studies, the purpose of the study was to make informed decisions on assisting the local community and also ensure application of the council-approved municipal parking management strategy. Next slide, please. So looking back to the 2017 studies, there were a number of issues and opportunities identified. The parking availability was deemed to be an issue, particularly at certain times and in certain locations. To the extent possible, solutions were developed and implemented in response to these issues and opportunities. Examples included harmonizing the time limits along the Main Street corridor, creating additional on-street spaces on some side streets, and better promoting off-street public parking options. Since then, the municipal park management strategy and the rate setting guidelines that are contained therein have been revised. Now, if paid parking is warranted per the guidelines, it can now be recommended for council to approve. The process to, sorry, next slide, please. Sorry, Rosa. The process to carry out a local area parking study is somewhat prescriptive and leans heavily on both data collection and consultation. The process to gather data and information started in early 2023, and as part of the consultation, we've had a number of touch points with the community dating back to last summer. In addition to regular contact with the BIAs and the community associations and hosting a series of community information sessions, we have maintained and shared web content and an Engage Ottawa page through most of the process. There's been a lot of good feedback to come from the consultation sessions. Some has related to parking issues and concerns, but a lot has had to do with the prospect of paid parking, which has been a focal point for stakeholders through this process. Next slide. Thanks. So at a summary level, the parking occupancy data collected points to either very high or increasing parking demand across all sectors of the Main Street, which I will cover in a little more detail over the next couple of slides. We know that there is also additional pressures that compound things. We've seen reductions in available on-street parking due to things such as the introduction of traffic calming and seasonal patios. In addition, Westboro and Wellington West are seeing quite a few developments, which ordinarily will create pressures, but these impacts have been compounded by a lack of both residential and visitor parking being included in many of those developments. So in particular, a lack of visitor parking creates issues because there are requirements for things like home care, service appointments, and regular social visits that have to be accommodated, and it's typically through using on-street parking. We also see with the length of time that people stay for, we see issues, with the length of time people stay for. While the number varies by sector across this area, overall, about a quarter of the vehicles park in excess of 3 hours. When we look at the situation beyond the Main Street, on aggregate, we see that there are much lower levels of demand in close proximity to the Main Street corridor. That said, there are some of those side streets do experience higher levels of demand compared to others. Next slide, please. So looking at the data, so there's a lot that was collected through this process, but I'm going to focus on the occupancy data because it has the largest bearing on the paid parking question. So to review and ensure clarity, when we look at occupancy, that 85% mark is important. At that point, according to best practices, parking is too full. There's not enough parking available for people coming into the area, and this can be detrimental, resulting in increased traffic and general frustration. Adding pricing or increasing rates at that point is a key tool to drive turnover and create more available parking. In alignment with municipal park management strategy, we use peak demand as a reference point to ensure there's an appropriate level of available parking at all times. So first with Westboro, this map takes us from Broadview to Island Park. We see continuing high levels of demand at peak in the first few sectors towards the west. This is where there's Mountain Equipment Co-op and a number of other shops. So whereas demand has been much lower heading east through sectors 4 and 5, we see that it is increasing as a result of new developments. Next slide, please. And looking at Wellington West, this shows a stretch of the Main Street from Island Park heading east roughly to the Trillium line and contains the Hindenburg community. There have been increases in demand across most of the sectors, with all areas now showing very high demand at peak, which translates to very little available parking at those busier times. Next slide. When we look at both areas at a broader scale and compare them to other commercial zones, we see that Westboro and Wellington West have some of the most in-demand on-street parking in the city. From a consistency standpoint, there have long been complaints from other areas who feel as though they are at a competitive disadvantage with parking being free in Wellington West and Westboro. Ultimately, our rate setting guides guidelines, serve two purposes, both to ensure that rates are appropriately set to serve the needs of each individual area, but also to ensure a level playing field. When we've looked for feedback on parking-related issues in these areas, there have been some key themes. Many acknowledge there are issues with parking availability along the main street, particularly in the Westboro area. Similarly, some residents indicated that their streets are busy with parked cars and there are increasingly issues with parked vehicles encroaching on driveways, fire hydrants, intersections, and the like. There's some general frustration that these trends are increasing due to the impacts of the developments in the area. The extent of currently available transit options and connectivity to transit for both visitors and employees of local businesses was also flagged as an issue. Given the focus of stakeholders on paid parking through the process, there was also some clear themes related to the possible introduction of paid parking. Through discussions and feedback, the trends were similar to the 2017 studies in that some support was expressed, but most of the sentiment was not in favor of paid parking. Concerns related to paid parking related to the perceived impact on businesses and what it will mean for the volume and issues related to parked cars on the side streets. Where possible, the feedback and concerns related to parking issues has been accounted for in our recommendations. This includes the implementation of paid parking, which has a purpose in alleviating pressures and has corresponding benefits. So I'll now move on to the recommendations and discuss the details related to paid parking a little further. Thanks. So when we look to address issues, there are a set of tools and measures that are available to us to improve parking supply, parking availability, or the demand for parking. There are some other supporting measures, which I'll cover in a couple of slides, but given where we've come from in 2017, other measures that have already been pursued and how things line up relative to the rate setting guidelines, paid parking is the primary recommendation here. This would cover the Main Street corridor from end to end, from Broadview to the Trillium line. Similar to other areas, the parking may wrap around on the side streets, consistent with where there is commercial property. Other streets to be included due to their commercial nature are Danforth, as well as parts of Churchill and Holland. The map on this slide helps to provide a visual of where paid parking is projected for. The spaces in red would be newly implemented paid parking, while the orange spaces on Holland, Spencer, and Hamilton in the vicinity of Holland Cross is where there is already paid parking. The rate setting guidelines offer some flexibility, which will help in supporting the implementation of paid parking here. There is an allowance for an introductory rate, which would help to mitigate the impact. At $3 an hour, on-street parking would be slightly cheaper here than in other nearby and comparable areas. Over time, rates could be adjusted up and down, consistent with our demand-based pricing model, which was the subject of the first report on the agenda today. On a zone-by-zone basis, if parking demand is either too high or too low, rates will be adjusted up or down accordingly. The target is for peak demand of between 50 to 85%. If paid parking is approved, demand would be assessed twice per year towards determining if adjustments are warranted. What we don't know at this point is what the days and hours of paid parking would be for Wellington West and Westboro. The next stage in following through on the updated municipal park management strategy will be to complete a citywide review to ensure consistency in this approach and alignment with the rate setting guidelines. This will be completed prior to the implementation of paid parking in Westboro and Wellington West if it's approved. Next slide. So looking further at paid parking for a moment, it's important to stress its purpose, which is to increase the availability of parking to better serve both visitors and businesses. The potential benefits extend beyond more available spaces as well. As is summarized here, there's an expected reduction in the amount of traffic circulating through the community looking for parking at busier times in particular. This has a positive impacts when it comes to emissions and from a safety perspective. While the use of parking fee revenue is constrained per the Municipal Act, there are investment opportunities back into the community to improve the level of some services and increase amenities, and those are also summarized on this slide. Introducing paid parking also provides for the flexibility to increase the time limits, as a requirement to pay would become the primary driver of turnover. This helps to address a point of feedback that the existing time limits of 90 minutes along the Main Street corridor did not provide enough flexibility for customers and visitors. Next slide, please. Leveraging other aspects of the parking management toolbox, we were able to address some of the other issues and concerns that have been identified. First is the bump in time limits to align it with most other areas that have on-street paid parking. Through a review, we found some limited additional on-street capacity in Wellington West, and we'll continue with this work through both BIAs to explore flexibility in existing loading zones. We will work to ensure awareness of development impacts and address employee parking pressures to the extent possible, providing support to the BIAs towards identifying and promoting alternatives to on-street parking, and also providing support through enhanced bike parking options. So with that slide, I thank you for your time, and ultimately be happy to take any questions.
Great. And just before we go to the single delegation we have, Councillor Leeper, I believe you have a motion you've drafted. Do you wish to go ahead and read that in? And we'll treat it all as one when we have questions to staff, and it's in front of our delegation as well.
Yeah, the delegation may wish to speak to it. And I do want to, I'm not a member of this committee, so I do want to thank Councillor Johnson for putting this forward on my behalf to ensure that it at least gets debate. So I have a motion that reads, whereas the recommendation of Kitchissippi parking strategy includes the implementation of paid on-street parking, including along the Main Street corridor on Somerset Street West, Mellington Street West, much of the Richmond Road in Kitchissippi Ward, and whereas the recommended implementation is in alignment with the rate-setting guidelines within the municipal parking management strategy approved by council. And whereas the businesses located on these streets have become reliant on the availability of street parking in proximity to their location for staff and owner parking. And whereas concerns have been raised by businesses related to accommodating parking for employees when paid parking is implemented, which coincides with the requirement to find alternatives to private vehicle parking, including using alternate modes of transportation. And whereas Westboro is not yet served by light rail and will not be served by light rail until at least the end of 2026. Therefore, be it resolved that the commencement of paid street parking in the areas recommended in this report not begin until the stage 2 extension of light rail enters revenue service. And of course, I'm happy to speak to that as we move into debate. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor. So we'll go to our delegation that we do have on this item. Are they joining us in person or online, Rosa? Oh, wonderful. You're in IRL. You can come sit right up here. And we do have a presentation I believe you did submit, and I will make note of the fact we also did receive another communique that's been put onto the drive as well from, just pull this up here. I got my computer back up and running. I was without radar for a while, so I apologize. So we also have one from Westboro Village, correspondence received. It's on your shared drives for anyone wishes to read it prior to the council meeting. Today we have Lesbeth, I believe that's correct, West BIA, and we're just going to pull up the slides here. Do I have the right person?
Right person, wrong name. Elsbeth, actually. But close enough.
Elspeth, okay. I like that very unique spelling. We'll just be one quick sec.
Approximately 15 minutes.
I don't know if anyone else is having this issue, but I can't hear
Sorry,
anything.
say again?
Yeah, Councillor, we're just solving a technical issue. We'll just be about 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Oh, thank God, we're getting it back up here now, I believe. Elspeth, how's your memory? I'll ask you why. It's because Zoom land and our public can see this online, but in the room, these screens are locked temporarily. So you got it on your phone. Yes. Hallelujah. Okay. So on that, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm not going to need 5 minutes. Our point is very brief. Effectively, so I'm the vice chair of the Wellington West Business Improvement Area. We would have more people here, but we actually are having our own town hall today, so it was not great timing for us, but this is important. This is one thing that has been deemed, and I think Councilor Leeper can confirm that this has probably been the most talked about item at in our riding. Would you agree with that? That our BIA members view this became like the main conversation at our most recent AGM. And just the fact is, nobody in our area wants it. None of our members, we have 600 plus members. They're all opposed to it. Or certainly we've heard from 0 members that are for it. We've heard from many, many, many who are opposed to it. And one of our problems that we see is that, and as the previous presenter mentioned, is there's a lot of talk about the need for it in Westboro. We view the data doesn't support it for Wellington West. In fact, two of the graphs, so in the presentation that I think can be seen on Zoom, but not in person, the sort of the level that the city presents as it's a practical capacity for parking within our zone, within the Wellington West BIA, we don't meet it most of the time. So most of the time for most of the zones, we are within the practical capacity for parking. So by that standard, we don't see that your own study supports parking for Wellington West. It seems like it supports it for Westboro, not so much for East Westboro, not for Wellington West, and that there's an issue of you want to lump us all together because you've got paid parking in Somerset, around Somerset Street. You have paid parking and you need it in West Wellington or Westboro. So now you're telling the rest of us that we have to be stuck with it because you need it in 2 disparate areas. Like our view is, what's that have to do with us? Our businesses don't need it. Our businesses don't want it. I believe our community doesn't want it. And frankly, our businesses are suffering, right? Like Main Street is not doing well. The suburbs are doing well retail wise. Main Street is not. They don't need this. So that is in a lump my presentation. Thanks.
Great, and thank you very much for that. We do have your slide. That is what we do, and we do have a question from Councillor Trosser.
Hi there. Thank you so much for being here. So I do represent Centertown and Chinatown in particular, and I just don't know how to answer the question to my members in Chinatown when they say, why does Wellington West have free parking and we don't? Chinatown is an incredibly economically depressed area that's also struggled during the pandemic. How much you think I could answer them if we elected to not implement paid parking?
I mean, the city presented like a number saying if you're below this amount, you're fine for parking, and we're below that amount. So if your area is below that amount, you shouldn't have parking either. I mean, this is our city standard, right? We're supposed to be using data. I used to be an electronic warfare engineer. If I disregarded data, we would all be in big trouble, right? Like you can't just have a data point and then say, our study says you're below that data point, but we're going to treat you as if you're above it. So I would say to you, to your residents, and I don't know if we can see like what are the numbers in Chinatown. If the numbers in Chinatown suggest that you shouldn't have paid parking, then you shouldn't have paid parking. And you should be bringing that up with the city. But if your numbers suggest that you should have paid parking, then you should have paid parking. Like it's pretty simple, right? Like numbers don't typically lie. That would be my answer.
Great. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate that you're drilling in on one area within the study, Wellington West, and the numbers that we got in staff's presentation were certainly quick. And I will ask staff a question about numbers for that isolated area. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the fact that as the VP of the Wellington West BIA, you are fighting for the interests of your members. I cannot begrudge you that at all. But on the issue of you're saying that your businesses are struggling and that they do not need the other burden, I can only imagine that for any other business in any other area where their customers and staff do have to pay for parking, that they would see what you are looking for as a competitive advantage for those businesses. Seeing as how customers can say, where might I go if I want to buy fresh pasta? There or there? I have to pay for parking there. I will go here. So can I ask you, if you can be objective about this, do you see a rationale for why the unfair advantage that you feel would be imposed on businesses in Wellington West, why there should be cause that they deserve what could be seen as a competitive advantage over any other shopping area within the core that other businesses have to pay parking for?
I mean, if you're going to ask that question, why restrict it to the core, right? Because part of the reason our businesses aren't doing well is people are shopping at suburban malls where everything is free, or they're parking along along Maryvale where everything is free. So, I mean, if you're going to go by that argument, we should have paid parking in all the lots, all down Maryvale, all down Woodruff, all, you know, in Barhaven and Canada. So we do have a problem, right? We're sending people from the core to the suburbs to do their shopping, and people live in the core in the idea of having I don't need a car, but if all the businesses die in the core, then you're going to need a car to get to the suburbs to get to your shopping. So I guess that's the answer I'd say.
I appreciate that. But if we are talking about within the core and suburbs, would you therefore be advocating for the fact that if we truly want to make things fair for businesses, that you would be advocating for the removal of paid parking on Somerset, on Bank, on Elgin?
I would be advocating that the city has set a limit. The city has set this 85% capacity thing. And what I would say is if this is your judgment for whether you should add paid parking somewhere, you should also be using that judgment line for, is it time to remove paid parking? And if you have areas in the rest of the core that are lower than 85%, then yes, you should remove the park. I mean, this is just, this is basics, right? Like if you talk to any other engineer, they tell you the same thing. Like you have your data needs. If you're below the needs, don't do it. If you're above the needs, do it. We're below the needs. I don't know where Somerset Ward is, where Somerset Street and Preston Street are in terms of these numbers. If they're higher, then that justifies having it. If they're lower, then it doesn't. Like that would be my stance. Like just let's use the data. Let's not pretend otherwise. And that is the goal, right? I mean, I understand that there's a need for revenue, but this is also then presented as not as a revenue generating tool, but as I'm not really sure what the point is, truthfully, like some of the stuff that, no offense, some of the stuff that was presented before as the reasons for it, I'm not sure they really hold a lot of water. It is, let's face it, a revenue generating tool, but you have a standard. Let's stick with the standard.
Thank you. And I will be following up with the staff about the isolated numbers for Wellington West, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Lieber. Forgive me, Councillor Lowe. I apologize, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Leeper moved a motion to delay the implementation of this, to attempt to delay the implementation of this until stage 2 LRT opens, which right now is hovering somewhere between 2026 and early 2027. Between now and then, there's likely going to be a lot of change in your community and the communities adjacent to you. Are you, what's your view of sort of that, what's your view of sort of putting off the decision, we're making a decision today, but putting off the implementation with, there's always an opportunity to reconsider in 2, maybe 3 years. But what's your, do you have any opinion on that?
I mean, obviously our members would prefer, I mean, if there's a choice between get it now, get it later, and that's our only choice. Our choice would be, I can speak for everyone and say our choice would be get it later, but our choice would be don't get it. The data doesn't support us getting it. Let's not get it. Now that said, I mean, I think some of what the city staff were saying is that they're suggesting the numbers are trending upwards. I'm not sure that's actually fair based on like COVID changes, work from home changes, that sort of stuff. So that's a bit of an oddball comment to make. So I almost would suggest, if Councillor Leeper's proposal could include, let's redo the need analysis towards the end of 2026 and see if numbers are actually trending up, or whether, because right now, like COVID changed everything, right? It's hard to have a pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID data and suggest that that's meaningful. So I guess that would be my stance. If we are going to actually, if you're saying that you're going to go ahead with it, then how about go ahead with it, but let's redo the numbers at the end of 2026 to see if it actually does justify it for our area, because currently it does not.
I think that's a fair request, and certainly a request I can see if staff, maybe Councillor Leeper can see if staff will be amenable to. We've had 2 years since sort of the height of COVID has has sort of gone away, and then we have 2 more years before, you know, if that's successful, we have 2 more years before that. So 4 years of data would be very good to help make an informed decision in the future, I guess. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. And this question is probably more for the benefit of committee than anybody else, but I just want to make sure that I understand correctly the assertions or the approach that you're taking to this issue. Staff have determined that the appropriate study area is the commercial Main Street in Kitchissippi ward. And I don't believe that they are required to study things on a BIA basis, but we'll explore that with them. They have said the demand for parking on the commercial corridor in Kitchissippi ward is high enough to warrant the implementation of paid parking. Your assertion is that the correct study area is one study for Wellington West with a decision to be made about it, and another study made of Westboro with a separate decision to be made of it, correct?
I mean, my assertion, the number, the sort of breakup of the area that I'm looking at was a presentation given by the city where they had, I think there were 6 different zones in Wellington West, and I think there were 5 in Westboro. Yeah. And my understanding is that from that, out of those total, I think 11 zones that they presented, I think 3 of them suggested the 3 that were Westboro. So I guess my stance is, if you've already been using these 11 sections, why wouldn't you continue to use those 11 sections? And then depending what the data says, yep, go with parking in those ones. So I'm not saying Westboro and Wellington West is separate. I'm saying you have these zones. I mean, even within Wellington West, right? Like, I think it's the area closest to the Trillium line. If you put paid parking there, like they're at what, like 30% sometimes? Like, it doesn't make any sense at all, right? So this idea, like, we're in 2024, this is a data world we live in. There's no reason you can't have little pockets, and you already have it, right? Like, we have paid parking near Parkdale Market.
Right.
So you know that you can have a little pocket of paid parking. So why are we pretending that we have to do a one-size-fits-all solution? It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Okay, no, and I think I've understood the assertion correctly, and I think that's useful clarity for the committee as well. I guess what we're going to ask staff about is on page 17 of the report, a coordinated approach to parking management in Westboro and Wellington West was taken, considering the increasingly contiguous nature of the commercial Main Street, and as any changes to parking in one area have the potential to impact the other. And that's sort of a fundamental statement about their approach, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to, I'm going to guess, disagree with it.
I would disagree with that, yes. I don't think it's a contiguous reason. Even looking at their own data in terms of the times of day when things are busy, like the times of day where it's busy in Wellington Village versus Hintonburg within Wellington West is very different. Yep. So this notion that it's all one big area, there's some areas that are more restaurant, there's some areas that are more retail, there's some areas that are closer to Tunney's pasture. So the time of day where parking is an issue is vastly different even within it. So this notion that it's contiguous is, I would disagree strongly.
Okay. And then my final question, Mr. Chair, is with respect to what I've heard back from the consultations. I attended, multiple briefings and open houses, et cetera. My motion is focused on the adjustment that staff in Kitchissippi Ward are going to have to make when paid parking is removed, that there is a significant amount of free street parking use made by staff who are working at the restaurants and the businesses and the stores. Can you describe what some of the staff adjustments might need to be if paid parking is implemented in Kitchissippi?
Yeah, and that was a big comment that our members made at our AGM, is that they have a lot of our members, I mean, they're talking about, like, coffee shops and retail and stuff like that. And so for them, like, yes, Wellington West is well served in terms of transit, but unfortunately, as you know, our transit's not super reliable in terms of timing. Hopefully we're going to improve that, but currently it's not. And something to consider. So everyone here, if you take, transit, or if your staff do, if someone's a little bit late for work, it's not a huge deal because you just stay late at the end of the day. But when you work in retail, you work in a restaurant, that's not a thing, right? You can't be late for your 7 a.m. Like, we can't be late for our 7 a.m. clients, for instance. Like, so if someone's going to have trouble with the train or the bus, we have to add like an extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes to make sure we're absolutely there on time. So for that reason, a lot of staff in the area drive. Yep. So as a result, they have, like, some of them, like, I'm lucky, my business, we actually have 3 parking spots, so we're fine. Most in the area don't. So they have their staff having to run out and, move their car. So there have been some requests for things, the equivalent of parking permits for residential, right? Like we have residential parking permits in the area. There have been requests for as a potential, if you're going to force paid parking on the street, then perhaps we can have something of that sort for the employers.
Right. So the extent of the problem associated with staff parking, which I think staff have referred to in the report as long-term parking, like it's people who are doing more than coming in and parking for an hour or two, is very different between Westboro and Wellington West. In Westboro, they're going to remove, and I'll be making a point of talking about the removal of, I think it's Route 50, Route 89, the 16 is no longer going to run from downtown into Westboro. Some big changes. You know, where I live, we have some of the greatest proliferation of transit routes in the city. I am going to assume that if committee is convinced that we need to give Westboro a bit of a break in terms of delaying the implementation of paid parking until transit is well served by the train, that we should do that across the entire study area and not just for Westboro, such that the implementation of paid parking, if it is delayed, would be delayed for both Wellington Village and for Westboro Village.
I mean, I guess I don't really have a comment on that in the sense that, I mean, I just don't agree with the idea that it's all one contiguous region. So,
okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your delegation today. And we have that slide included for members of council so they can see it prior to the vote at council. Thank you for coming out today.
Thank you.
So at this point, we do have staff here to answer questions. Do we have questions to staff at this point? Councillor Troster and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you so much. I just have a question. How long has Chinatown had paid parking for? Somerset West specifically?
Chair, all of the existing paid parking in our commercial areas dates back decades. And I mean, our newest areas is around train yards, which is a few years old, but beyond that, we're talking 80s, 90s. So I don't have a specific point of origin.
Long before.
Long time.
Before LRT.
Correct.
Okay. Do you think you could, do you have a sense of how Wellington West and Hintonburg compare to lower occupancy paid areas like Little Italy North or Centertown South?
We collect, Mr. Chair, we collect data regularly. So we collect data across our entire paid parking network twice a year. So we have a wealth of data to refer to. And I think we captured it, but the current demand for on-street parking in both Westboro and Wellington West is higher than we see in Somerset Chinatown, Little Italy, particularly to the south, and more so to the north, Glebe, those other areas as well.
So you're saying demand is higher than areas that have existing paid parking? Okay.
Correct.
I just have a question. If Councillor Leeper's motion passed, do we have a sense of how much parking revenue the city would be losing out on?
So, Chair, we have not projected revenue because there are a number of variables at play. We have not determined what the hours and days would be, and those are key variables to kind of determining. That said, if we have an idea of how many spaces, there's roughly 700 paid spaces that would come online across these two areas if approved. And if we look at our annual report, which is on the agenda as well today, identifies our average revenue per space across the city is, I think it's 1,750. So some quick math there puts us at about just over $1 million, $1.2 million. If that's making some assumptions around,
okay. So we'd be potentially foregoing $1 million in revenue.
That's the potential. And
just for the sake of anyone watching, where does that revenue go, generally speaking?
So, Chair, as parking fee revenue, it stays within the parking program. We are constrained to what we can spend parking fee revenue on. It needs to be in alignment with our municipal park management strategy, and it needs to have a reasonable connection to parking, and that's in accordance with the municipal act.
So, but part of it does go to cycling facilities or cycling parking in particular.
Bike parking specifically, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Great questions. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. If we approve the report today and then at council, how much time will it take for staff to implement the equipment and actually start the paid parking program?
So Chair, there are a number of requirements tied to this, securing the equipment, developing our communications approach. We've identified Q2 2025 as a likely date, and winter gets in the way as well. It's harder to implement. So on the other side of that, we'd likely be in a position to implement.
I just try to sort of predict what Councillor Leeper's motion, how much of a delay that would be. So let's say it's a year. Aside from financial implications, what other concerns might staff have about a delay of a year to implement?
Chair, the concerns would be that the status quo would continue, and we see the trends increasing to in terms of that lack of available parking. So that would continue, and along with the implications on the community and on the main street itself. But otherwise, I mean, our recommendation is that move forward, because that's what our policy says. That's what our rate data guidelines support.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Devon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Scott. I appreciate the question so Councillor Troster asked a question about revenue that I wanted to get the information. So I appreciate getting that information there. So I'll admit it's even when I factor in the presentation from the West Wellington BIA delegate on the impact of small business, I'll admit that it's hard for me to contemplate increasing parking rates across other sectors in the city and the impact that will have on those businesses who I assume are also struggling, while also contemplating continuing to extend free parking in an area where parking is in such demand. I believe the argument she made would cast greater concerns on those other businesses where we are now set to increase parking. I'm going to assume that if we can, because you're responsible for your timeline of anticipating that you can implement this by Q2 2025, you are not responsible for the timeline of when LRT service will be available. I think we have enough history around this table to know that projecting LRT availability in 2026, I'm not going to bet money on it. And so right now we are quite likely perhaps offering a year for any residents or business owners, employees to adjust and to prepare for alternatives. And I think that year is a good buffer. Can I ask two questions? So as to the delegates, what I believe, I understand the delegates' recommendation was to compartmentalize the Wellington West area. So my first question, because I remember from your graphs, you were talking about several areas where the capacity is exceeding 85%. You had some areas exceeding 100%. So just brief, is it true that in the Wellington West area that delegate was addressing, that there is less demand, there is more capacity? Is there a significant difference between that area and the other areas?
So Chair, what we see from the data is that, yeah, true, there are some the highest demand areas are in Westboro, right? And to your point, Councillor, was one area that was over 100%. But there's a lot more variation in Westboro. What we see in Wellington West is much more consistency when we look at that peak parking demand from end to end. And we see two sectors that are over 85%, and then the remaining sectors, or at least at one of the survey points last year, were at 85%. So that they're rubbing right up against that practical capacity marker.
Thank you. And even if there is a significant delta between the other areas in Wellington West, is it fair to say that if hypothetically we were to compartmentalize Wellington West and continue to expend free parking there, where we create new paid parking in the areas adjacent to it, that that would just compound the existing state of Wellington West, and that would put increasing demand and diminishing capacity on that area because people would just seek the free parking there?
Chair, I'd say that's certainly a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. And may I assume that staff does not support the LEAPR motion?
Chair, our conclusions, our recommendations, part of this report to reflect the rate setting guidelines, which are council approved, and we've determined that the warrants or the thresholds for paid parking are met currently. So we would be consistent in our recommendation for implementation to occur when possible, which would be Q2 next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. This question might either be for staff or for the mover of the motion, actually. The proposal to delay the implementation of paid parking until revenue service for stage 2 LRT, does that, are you suggesting, and understanding what staff said about it taking about a year to fully implement, is the suggestion that the equipment sort of go in maybe starting Q4 2025 or Q1 2026 to go into service maybe a week or month after LRT enters service, or are we going to start the process when LRT enters service? So it'll be revenue service day plus a year, like so Q1, 2, 3, or 4, 2027.
Scott and I are looking at each other.
Yeah, I don't.
No,
stand up.
the intent of the motion would be that LRT goes into service end of 2026, very early 2027, and the meters are in place and get turned on once that train is running.
Okay, so okay, I get it. Is there a scenario where we, given that there are going to be changes to that community in the next 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, just a few changes in the next 2.5 years in that community. Is there a scenario where the numbers can be sort of updated to reflect that, or is that or is that the study? Like I don't want to create a scenario where we're telling you to go out and do another study, but at the same time, I think numbers that sort of reflect the time period to which it's delayed might actually be of use.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, we're always in the process of collecting information. Even just earlier this month, we were collecting information just to kind of reinforce the data that had previously collected right back in 2023 for this area. So in all of our existing paid parking areas, we're always collecting data. So that's a process that will continue here. It'll be a monitoring exercise regardless of the outcome here today.
Okay, that sounds. I'm inclined to support the councillor's motion there, just because he has his community's interests in mind. But overall, as a policy, I think it's an area that is due for measures like this because, it's of everything you said. I'm not going to repeat it, but everything you said. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have to say this is a real struggle for me. And, I've spoken with the mover of the motion as well. I appreciate the rationale that we want to ensure that staff who are trying to get places on time can do so. But I find the rationale somewhat falls apart when we think that the transit service is going to be the thing that helps them. At the end of the day, I have a zone in College Ward, the Constellation Zone, that only has a 6 to 11% usage rate, and I have residents in Center Point who feel that paid parking is also what is pushing people onto their streets. Can staff comment on the impact of paid parking and the pressure that we see on side streets? What's the interaction between those two things?
Sure. Yes, I think it is inevitable that you're going to see some form of impact when you have paid parking and adjacent residential streets. In the case of busier areas, I think there's a bit of an offset, though, a little bit of a push and pull, if you will, in that there are people more likely to park on the main street who would otherwise park on the side street if there is available parking to be had. So it is a very location specific or thing where the impacts will vary. What you have on Constellation and Centerpoint is unique in and of itself because of the surrounding area. It's not necessarily, I know there are businesses, but it's not a commercial main street per se, right? So you may see more of an impact there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we do see a lot of parking on the side streets around Richmond Road and Westboro because the parking is always full on Richmond Road, and then you see people parking in side streets on other areas where the paid parking isn't used. One might assume one of the biggest reasons why everyone is parking on side streets is less because of parking and more because everybody owns a car in this city and uses it to get anywhere because they can't rely on transit. I can't stop thinking about that. So how does parking fit into the larger transportation master plan goal of increasing modal share? How do we help people to move to other modes of transit if parking continues to be cheaper and easier than taking our transit?
Chair, I will, I'll answer that just by drawing a distinction between our on-street parking and off-street parking. So we have, and through parking services, we manage obviously a lot of on-street parking across a number of areas through the city, but we also operate a number of lots. And the distinction is really that the on-street parking is designated for short-term parking, right? It's the quick visits, it's the lunches, it's different things like that. The on-street parking, sorry, the off-street parking is more the long-term parking, right? It's allocated for long-term parking that in what is in many cases commuter parking, right? So we have as part of our rate setting on the off-street side, and we have had them for a number of years now, as a means of kind of supporting those transportation objectives, a number of mechanisms where we will try to dissuade that long-term parking at our lots. We try to price ourselves higher than the market when it comes to long-term parking and at or below market when it comes to short-term parking. So, and then we also try to, where it's viable, ensure that we're priced above a transit pass as well. So it's just a couple of examples of how we've operated to address really that long-term parking side. Short-term parking, there's always a potential for transit and for alternate modes, but that becomes a little less the case when we're talking about short-term visits. People may be crossing town to go for an hour or thereabouts to a specific area.
Okay, so in the conflict that's being described, then, if we are focused on staff that are working at these small businesses, they are a longer term parker. What are the solutions that aren't related to, trying to turn people over in the short-term parking, which I think is truly a commendable approach to supporting those small businesses? How do we support those staff? Is it a matter of parking permits for businesses and organizations so that they can have somewhere else to park? Or is it a matter of, some kind of specific area in a parking lot nearby that can be organized? What are the solutions that we can provide that doesn't involve affecting our short-term parking policies?
Certainly, Chair. I mean, our mandate focuses on the short-term parking and ensuring that available short-term parking. So that is where our focus is. We received a lot of feedback, and the delegation spoke to the importance of employee parking and the use of the on-street parking. We do have fewer tools immediately available to us on that side. We have committed, and through the study, through the report, to work with the BIAs. And there are some things we can take the lead on, but some things we can more so support the BIA on to find those solutions We do see, I mean, the amount of that off-street parking does vary by area. It's, you know, compared to some areas, it's relatively healthy in Westboro and Wellington West. But that is, those are avenues that are somewhat outside of our realm of control. So we will support that however we can. The idea of permits is one that also came up through our consultation, through the feedback. We're limited given our current policy constraints in terms of what can be offered there, but there may still be opportunities that can be pursued over the longer term.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Great, Councillor Kavanaugh, and seeing no others, Councillor Leeper will wrap up after that.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Scott, as always, for the presentation. I get that the whole idea of charging for parking is so that people don't hog the spot all day. That's one of the biggest concerns. So you have turnover, so it's better for business. That was always my understanding. And because it is limited, it's not the same as a mall, which is still old school, and where there's lots of spots, but they're starting to go away now. We're losing those. We got 2 going up already, just in my ward. So they're disappearing. It's the new reality, but I really appreciate the motion put forward by my colleague, because I think having it lined up with the opening of stage 2 makes a lot of sense. It just reminds people of alternatives and to not be using their cars as much. So I think that's very, very helpful. I don't know if it's a massive revenue loss, but I just wanted to check in on, you know, is this problematic? Because I believe it'll be well received if it's tied in with something like this, and that we're making sure that, you know, there's, because it just seems wrong that oh, just a second, my computer just told me I'm low on power. I don't know why. I've got it plugged in. But I'll be quick. Just want to make sure that this isn't a big deal, but anyway, I just want to say I support it, and I don't know if you have any comments about having that segue.
Yeah, is that it, Councillor?
That's it.
Okay, so you support. Okay, Councillor Leeper on wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So when I was elected in 2014, parking issues in Westboro and parking issues in Wellington West were among the first issues that got dropped on my plate. And I want to express my sincere thanks to staff. You have studied, you have consulted, you have been collaborative, open, receptive for 10 years now. In terms of addressing the parking issue, and throughout you have been professional and evidence driven, and I'm grateful for your work on this. I am not opposing the introduction of paid parking. I think you've all received my communications on that front. When the recommendation comes forward to council to implement paid parking in Kitchissippi Ward, I will be voting yes for it. I support paid parking as a market solution to handling a scarce resource, which is parking, obviously. And I do understand residents' concerns. I live half a block from a very busy stretch of Wellington West. I have parking pressures on my street from shoppers and from intensification. I do understand the concerns that residents are expressing, but throughout the consultation, I heard an issue consistently, which is that staff who are currently relying on free parking on the street are going to be significantly impacted by the loss of that free street parking. And we need alternatives. I think on page 43, they look at the usage, how long people are parked for, and you'll see the length of time that people are parked on the street. Clearly, staff parking on the street is prevalent. The side street parking as an alternative is going to get harder as we intensify. I'm watching my block of Hamilton North off Wellington, where curb cuts are disappearing, number of units are increasing. It is getting harder to park on my street. There is, you saw in the report, a really big disparity on the availability of general purpose paid parking as well. There is Holland Cross that is in the Wellington West BIA area. There is not sort of the same number of paid parking spots off street in Westboro. And then, you know, depending where in the city you are, trying to get to work in Westboro could involve taking a bus to a bus to a bus in order to get to the corner of Churchill and Richmond. We are removing routes 50 and 89. We're removing the 16 from downtown. It is going to get harder to get into Westboro by bus moving forward. And I would point you in the report to page 38 to Councillor Johnson's question about how staff intend to mitigate the impact of implementing paid parking on staff in that long term. Solutions can involve one or some combination of finding long-term parking, which is proving challenging. I think when you are asking questions on the next item, which is the parking implementation, you're going to hear that staff are kind of being challenged to develop those partnerships, build new garages to create capacity. And then more importantly, leveraging alternate modes of transportation. For example, transit and cycling. Yeah, let's leverage great transit as a way to mitigate the impact of the loss of that parking, but we have to have the transit there first. The transit has to be there. That's part of the bargain that we're striking with our residents is we're going to put paid parking in. It's going to be more difficult for staff to find parking within the neighborhood to work at the shops and the restaurants, but we're going to give them a train. That train is almost here. It will not be a long delay. $1 million in revenue is entirely theoretical at this point and not earmarked for anything. So that's the grand bargain that is, I think, in place to help those employees of those shops. Kitchissippi Ward is increasingly an important employment node. It draws workers from across the city. We are making it with our transit route changes more difficult to get in and out of until the train is running, which will be hopefully no later than 2027, a short delay away. So I am hoping that my colleagues will recognize that I am not seeking to stall the implementation of paid parking. I am not going to move that the opening of stage 2 LRT is an opportunity to revisit the issue. I am going to be voting in favor today, not today, I don't get to vote on this committee, at council, of implementing paid parking, and that vote will not change. But I am asking to help those employees with the mitigation that we say in our report we're going to help them with, which is great transit. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to add some commentary. And again, I want to thank staff. We're all in a very difficult position along with my committee members. We all love and respect Jeff. At the same time, this is a very difficult position because I don't associate parking totally with business. I actually think that parking and rotation is going to assist business. We just heard the train yards. They don't even have parking rates and they're going in the tank. So any assertion that those are correlated, I have a bit of a problem with, but I do have a problem with is that, and forgive me, Scott, should we have not have done this long ago? And this has just been one pocket that's just been remaining.
Chair, as I indicated at the outset of my presentation, I mean, this is something that's been studied for a long time now, and paid parking has been a recommendation as part of virtually all those studies, and those go back, like I said, decades. And it was deemed warranted in 2017. So the answer to your question is per our rate setting guidelines, then yes, this likely should have been in place.
Okay, thank you. So that would be yes. So that being said, again, with the most respect, I do also have a couple other issues with this. I've heard from businesses that why is this a fiefdom? Why are they excluded and get bonused when it comes to parking when other businesses citywide have fed into our vision of less car-centric related shopping, other modes of transportation for greenhouse gas reduction. We had one delegation very passionately spoken, by the way, and I would do the same. But it does create a level of inequity amongst our entire city. You're talking about $1 million and tied to the completion of the western extension. Well, I'm living the dream in the east. That just got extended by a year overnight, like that. That $1 million will balloon just as quick. And there's no way constructors of LRT can guarantee me they'll be done because I won't believe them. That number will always increase. So for the reasons of the fact that we do have a city policy, we did support a lot of these items in the TMP. We just had a huge cycling award. It's Bike Month, everyone. For our fiscal conservative friends, this really does benefit a lot of the employees I do feel for, but ask the people at work at the local Happy Goat downtown or Starbucks, they're taking alternative forms of transportation to get there, and not just free parking for employees. So as much as I feel I am living in Wally World, I feel from a personal level, I should be supporting some free parking here, but I have to put on my fiduciary responsibility cap and say we're foregoing lots of money as a city. We're not adhering to our policies. So for that reason, I will not be supporting my good friend Councillor Leeper's motion today for those reasons, and I'll ask for a recorded vote on that. So Rosa, can you please call the vote?
Councillor Luloff? Oh, okay. Councillor Dudas?
No.
Councillor Gower?
No.
Councillor Johnson?
No.
Councillor Devine?
No.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor Troster?
No, sorry, Jeff.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor Desroches?
No.
Councillor Lowe?
No.
Vice Chair Kitts and Chair Tierney.
No.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
Great. Thank you very much. So that one's defeated.
Pardon me?
You said 8 yeas, 3 nays? Yes. Wasn't it 8 nays?
8 nays.
I'm sorry, it's 8 nays, 3 yeas. Thank you.
That's on the record, everyone. Sorry, Jeff, you thought you had that back, but didn't happen. That being said, we'll go to back to the next item on the agenda. The base motion on the actual motion itself, is that item carried? Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Leeper. So that being said, we'll go back to, I believe, the 6.3. Councillor Troster wish to hold. Questions to staff?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Chair. Do we have the right correct staff here? We're good? Okay. I just have a question because I received a letter from Bike Ottawa with some concerns, looking at the chart, particularly in document 6.3, I think it was pages 33 to 34, where there's a chart that suggests that funding for bike parking would be reduced by $100,000 a year for 4 years, so a total reduction of $400,000. I'm wondering if you could explain those numbers before I ask some questions.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Councillor, and through the chair. So when we tabled and had the public bike parking strategy approved, and this was in 2021, we projected what our capital requirements would be or could be over the next, over the near term. And as part of that, I think in the early years of the strategy, so the first couple of years, it was a little higher. We envisioned, bike lockers and expanding our network of bike parking. And then that number became consistently $400,000 per year. So What we've kind of, so the answer is kind of twofold. There's two pieces to this. And first is kind of the realities of what our capital spending has been and is projected that it could be over the next couple of years. And, you know, the $300,000, which we've reduced that allocation to, is more in line with what's feasible, given our existing capacity or given our existing resources. That said, you know, we're still in the implementation phase for the public bike parking strategy, and the vision was always to get things off the ground, to get things rolling, build our various subcomponents of the program up, and then assess where we need to be from a resourcing perspective and to reassess. So we have opportunities going forward. We go through this annual report process once a year. We also reassess as part of the budget process. We're doing this on a regular basis to determine what that level of funding should be. So
okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I'll close it off. And the other piece to it, the other side of the coin, if you will, is that we are experiencing pressures, right? Not so much on the revenue side. We've returned to pre-pandemic revenues. Those are a little more predictable. But on the cost side, we've had additional life cycle capital costs that have been identified. And those that are identified are more expensive than they have been in the past. This is no different than other, you know, aspects of the city. So as part of the exercise this year, in order to keep that parking reserve fund within the range that we've identified, so there's a floor and a ceiling to it, we needed to make some adjustments. And this wasn't the only adjustment that was made. We had a placeholder for new parking facilities, which we've eliminated, at least for the time being. We've reduced spending allocated towards parking facility improvements and our on-street modifications as well. So the bike parking we looked at it, and we still remain committed to bike parking and are excited about it. Even we've got a healthy program which is staffed, and we'll have lockers in a very near term, and that is just one component, but we're continuing to move forward. Our conclusion in going through that process was that we really only projected that there was capacity to spend that $300,000 per year over the next couple of years.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you don't feel like you have the staff to spend $400,000 a year.
We haven't developed the program quite to this point where we're in, let's say, in full speed with the lockers, right? In a couple of years, once we get the locker program and we find ways in which to identify locations, and there may be more opportunities, but that is definitely a component to it, is the available resources to spend.
Okay. So I am very excited. There is a secure bike locker that has been placed on Slater Street that will open very soon. Very excited about that. Approximately how much does one of those cost?
We purchased 3 bike lockers back a couple of years ago, and I think the total cost all in was about just over $100,000 for 3. Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned. I understand that you've increased life cycle costs for existing cycling parking, but I am very concerned because the number one issue, other than dangerous interactions between cyclists and cars at intersections, the other issue I hear about is bike theft in Centertown. It's a major problem. A resident just had his entire family's second set of bicycles stolen from his backyard shed. You know, during my election campaign, one of my campaign volunteers had both of the wheels stolen off his bike while he is campaigning for me. It is a huge problem in Centertown, and there is a huge demand for an expansion of not just parking facilities, but secure parking facilities. And I'm concerned that by cutting that figure, we're hampering an opportunity for growth. Our mode share, as we saw from the origin destination study, has increased in terms of cycling. The demand is there, but people are really scared to leave their bike outdoors all day while they're at work if there's no place to put them. And if we want to make that shift, I am just very concerned. I would be very, very curious to see going into the 2025 budget season, you know, what staffing you think you would need to be able to spend the full budget that was originally allocated. I mean, we're really here as a resource to you, so I would invite you to come and ask when it comes to budget time, just because it really concerns me to see a cut in a program that people are desperately asking for us to expand. So I think I'll leave that for now, but thank you very much for all your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. So Scott, I'm going to follow in the same vein as my colleague, Councillor Troster, and I'm going to see what avenue there might be for some level of reconsideration here, either today or in the near future. So if I understand correctly, projecting this difference of cost from 2025 to 2028 at a loss of 100,000 in capital per year, this would be the translation of a lost opportunity for 12 new bike lockers over that span, as per your math. 3 bike lockers equals $100,000. So that's 12 lost bike lockers over 4 years. This does, the difference in what I'm seeing in the chart here in document 1 from original budget to the revision budget, it does feel like what's in numbers here is so in contravention to what we speak about in terms of our aspirations and our values and our goals. It feels like the budget document is a direct contradiction of that. Ironically, just in the presentation you made about our rationale and our mitigation plan for the Kitchissippi parking study, in the last bullet point of what we will do to help people adjust is we will invest in alternatives, including additional bike facilities. Except now we can't do that as much as we want to do. And so even as we were saying, hey, Kitchissippi, we're going to change your life here. We're going to impose an inconvenience on you, remove your free parking, and we want you to come up with new ways to get to work, but we're not going to put that bike locker there that you need and that we say we'd like to do. I can't help but see that the differential in budget from 2025 onwards for life cycle renewal is such a significant increase. For 2025 alone, you go from a projected 2.27 million to 2.85. And then in 2026, a massive increase. I can understand that our assets need renewal, but if we were only to maintain the bike parking facilities at the 400,000 per year and take that away from what we have reallocated to parking facilities, I can't imagine that the difference over 4 years would be seismic. And I understand that you're saying that you just don't have the FTEs to implement this. But I guess what I'm concerned about is why, when we haven't even had the 2025 budget deliberation, we're charting a path for 4 years down the road that is handcuffing us from what we are saying we ultimately want to do. And I don't know enough about procedure here to ask you what kind of direction do you need so we can reverse what I feel like is a decision that is going against what we say we want to do. So is there anything I can do to help you, help me, help you? We're just receiving it, but this is, so if we're just receiving this, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just to be received. So Chair, through the Chair, certainly this is the capital program plan exercise is something we go through as part of this annual report every year. The decisions that are made relative to budget are follow, right? Those capital decisions for 2025 for the budget to be approved by council are still to be made, right? So this is a reference point, and our goal through this is to remain fiscally responsible to ensure that our parking reserve fund stays within an appropriate range. So any changes to the capital account, as I referenced, we can reflect them in this capital program plan when we table it, but also through the budget, which will come. So any direction to explore opportunities related to those adjustments are certainly something that staff would receive.
Forgive me, I'm still new to the game. Does that mean that there is basically opportunity and time and process to address this issue before we finalize the 2025 budget?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to put my voice out there as well for secure bike parking. I didn't realize what a luxury it was till I got it at City Hall, and how wonderful it is, because previous to that, I parked at City Hall and had stuff stolen off my bike. So it's a necessity. It's a peace of mind. I mean, you can lock a car, but a bike is very vulnerable. it's a piece of transportation. It is a vehicle, and we're trying to support it. We need to have that support. I'm very disappointed that we're not looking at that as a long-term plan. You have to have it. We just gave out awards for encouraging cycling. If you're going to use it as transportation, you need to know you have security, especially in areas where it's obviously more vulnerable. So I strongly support more cycle infrastructure related to bike parking that is secure. It's take a look at other cities. That's what they're doing. So I think we have to come back with that. And I think, is it possible to have a report to talk about that? Because I think we're missing an opportunity, especially with stage 2 opening up in just a couple of years. If I'm going to take I could bike to a station. It's not going to be very far for me after it opens, but leaving my bike there all day, I'd like to know that it's safe. Otherwise, it's going to turn me off. And I just need some security. And I think that's true for a lot of people. So is it possible to look at that and bring that back? I don't know if that's a staff inquiry, but I'm not a member of the committee. But can we do a survey of what's going on in other places?
Chair, yeah, certainly through our work in implementing the public bike parking strategy and in aligning ourselves with the current set of lockers that we're installing and soon to be active on. There's a lot of work has been done, but we do continue because one of the restrictions that we have is the size of the lockers and finding spaces to put them. So looking at opportunities and alternatives is something we continue to explore as we continue to implement the bike parking strategy. So that is certainly work that is ongoing on our end.
I think it's a good use of our revenue from the cars that are parking. So I hope that we're going to go that direction and move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, I did just want to add thank you very much for all the hard work on this file. So on this item, there's the report recommendations. Is that carried? Thank you. So we're moving on to item 7.1, Fernbank area speed reduction. We do have a speaker, Mike Lord. We do have a presentation. Mike, are you with us right now? That's fine. No, it's fine.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We do have your presentation. We'll just put it up on the screen.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So you have 5 minutes. I noticed that there is 20 slides. I will let you know that we will put them on the drive for councilors to review in the event that you run out of time in your presentation.
Well, I will be speeding. Thank you very much.
Great. Wonderful.
All right, my name is Mick Lord. Thanks for letting me present some views on this matter. I live in the Bayshore area, and though I don't live in this area on this proposal, I do have views to express. So I hope my views are taken into account and are used here in the future speed limit reduction and traffic calming proposals. So today I'll explain my views why this particular proposal in Fernbank area is exacerbating a bigger problem throughout Ottawa and has been proliferating for several years. I believe the committee's objectives is that we want drivers to slow down and thus improve the safety of cyclists, pedestrians, and local drivers. Next 2 slides, sorry. Sorry. So the proposal by Councillor Gower is that we need drivers to slow down in these areas. The current speed limits in this proposed area are 50 kilometers an hour, and the proposal is to lower it over a vast swath to roads of the roads to 40 kilometers an hour. The problem with this is that the speed limits in and of itself do not slow drivers down. This was explained to me by city engineers in the mid-2000s when my wife and I lived in the Crystal Beach area. There was a proposal at that time by the Community Association to lower the speed limit on Carling in that area around Andrew Hayden Park from 80 kilometers an hour to 60 kilometers an hour. My neighbors were successful in eventually to do this, but the city did try to explain to the Community Association that this was a bad idea, that this would not slow drivers down, that it would be difficult to enforce, and that it would overall raise the probability and severity of accidents on Carling. It was explained to us that people drive according to the road as it was designed. The engineers explained that speed limits are arrived at, not set, using the 85th percentile method. Now, I won't explain what that is here. I assume all of you already know what that is. Next slide. They used historic examples of Hunt Club where the speed limits were raised and lowered, and it had no impact on driver behavior. To make matters worse, schools and homes were constructed in bad locations on these high throughput roads. It is now that the city is realizing that these decisions were poor and that they are trying to solve the problem by lowering speed limits. And so these problems really can't be solved with speed limits. Next slide. There are better solutions and there are better tools in the toolbox. Next slide. So the best solution would be to go back in time, but of course this can't happen. Next slide. The next best solution would be optical illusions. I'm talking about optical illusions painted on the ground that affect driver behavior. Painted illusions on the ground are inexpensive and very effective. They work because drivers can't drive faster even if they tried because their brains and eyes are confused. It is very similar to why roundabouts are generally safer than traffic light intersections. This is because drivers have to slow down because traffic circles are confusing. Because they are already in use in Ottawa and around the world, there should be no problem to use these in this situation. Next slide. This is a photo taken from Google Maps. It shows a stretch as you come off the bridge from Gatineau, eventually turning onto King Edward Avenue. There are other examples of this in Ottawa. This is not the only one. The lines start far apart and get closer together, giving the driver the illusion that they are speeding up even when they are slowing down. As a result, the drivers slow down even more. I know from personal experience that this works very well. Next slide. This is a photo of an intersection in France where they painted weird squiggly lines all over the intersection. The result is that drivers were very confused, or are very confused. They slow down, they stop, and they pay attention. They take the turn slowly, nice and slow. Pedestrians are safer, drivers are safer, win-win. Next slide. A more expensive solution is to plant trees along the sides of the roads. This is effective because the driver's peripheral vision is cut down and it gives them the feeling that they don't have as much visibility around the trees. As much visibility without the trees. This already is in use in Ottawa, such as Cleemau in the Glebe. It is also used in Beverly Hills. It's not only beautiful, it raises safety. Next slide. This is a photo of Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills taken from Google Maps. As you'll see, the road has lots of driveways that exit onto the road itself. The speed limit is 25 miles an hour.
20 seconds?
Wow. Okay, so to 40 kilometers an hour. These beautiful, okay, so I'm just gonna skip. I'm gonna skip to slide 19. This is a short rendition of what actually happens in Ottawa as we continue to simply lower speed limits in the areas. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
I'd ask you, I'll give you 10 seconds to just
Sure.
wrap up. We've taken down the presentation. Mr. Lord, we have circulated to members of council. So if you want to take literally 10 seconds, I gotta be fair, right? It's always got to be the 5 minutes.
Of course, of course. So what I'm trying to explain is that lowering the speed limit is not going to do anything about calming traffic. Speed limits only exacerbate the problem and eventually lead to more photo radar in the city, which only tickets people. It does not actually slow down traffic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lord. Seeing no questions on this item. Thank you.
I'm just going to, hi, it's Councillor Kavanagh.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Lord because he raised a number of issues in Bay Ward. And yes, the speed limits do not necessarily make people go slower. but traffic calming measures are very helpful, and I appreciate some of the examples he's given. We'd love to have more trees. We just had a tree policy and we're working on getting more trees. Not always possible, but it's certainly something to be encouraged, and some of the other ways. Hard to do that on Carling, but there's other things that we can do to make people drive safely. I think that's the point. So just want to say, appreciate you mentioning that it's not just about speed limits.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor. So on that, I don't see any questions of staff. Just a reminder, this is on the speed reduction. Great visuals. I'm sure we all enjoy them, but on this item, is this item carried? Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I just want to make sure I go back. Rosa keeps me in line here. I'm just going to go to, I believe we have no in-camera items. We have the IPD, and forgive me, I was doing that during agenda clearing, but there was an IPD about Canada North Transit environmental assessment. This is a belt and suspenders thing. No one sees that to be lifted, so I believe, unless someone does, don't see it, we're fine. Notice of motion, there's none provided, no inquiries. Other business, no one leave yet, because I promised that I'd talk about this very briefly. It's about rolling stops, and I think we really have to have some key messaging around that as councillors and colleagues. I know we all get the #1 complaint is speeding, but quickly advancing is rolling stops. People, pedestrians in intersections are feeling in danger, cyclists are feeling in danger, and people are forgetting about that big white painted bar that is on the line that tells people to stop. Intersections are shared spaces for motorists, scooterists, pedestrians, and no matter how you're getting around, we have to be extra vigilant in these intersections, especially around schools. Making full stops, that means the body of your vehicle is resting on itself to come to a complete stop. Is very important. It will cost you in the pocketbook and demerit points and insurance if you don't do that and you are caught. I have actively worked with my community police officers as well, not to give warnings, but to actual issue fines, because it's becoming a larger and larger issue, especially since COVID. When on two wheels, you always have to also ride defensively, but at the same time, when you're in a motorized vehicle, you do certainly have the extra responsibility and weight behind you to ensure that you're paying attention. If you notice dangerous intersections, specifically in your neighborhood, please contact and report them to 311. Our staff will investigate, consider measures to improve the stops of compliance. And again, we'll continue to work with our local police services to ensure that we are enforcing this message. So that's all I had to add as other business today. Finally, we're on to adjournment, everybody, and our next meeting will take place August 22nd, 2024. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to staff in the clerk's office for keeping us online. We got through the little bugs in the system, and it's been a terrific day. Let's go enjoy the day. Thank you.